Okay, so we are live on YouTube and we are, let's see if we are, okay, and we're gonna be soon live on Facebook as well. Okay, so we're live. First of all, Ori, thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you.
Especially because I make these invitations, it's always for me a step in the dark because I don't know the persons I'm going to talk to. But only recently, then I found an interview of you to a Portuguese channel, and which I found very interesting and very enlightening. Although some of the things I wanted to ask you were asked there, and I arrived a little bit too late. I'll try to shape it a little bit differently. Although it's I don't think it's too much to repeat some of the things you've said there.
Yeah.
And so my first question for you was, can you a little bit to know a little bit about your upbringing in Israel? What kind of message throughout the education system in Israel? What kind of perception does an Israeli kid and then boy has about the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian occupied territories?
Yeah. Look, it's a very interesting question, and I think a very important one, and it encompasses many different elements. Basically, look, our society is a traumatized society, right? All the way back to the Second World War, and before that, yeah, and together with violence here from the establishment of Israel all the way until now, this the intifadas and so forth, right?
Yes.
Every Israeli has a relatives or friends who are victims of this situation. And I'm mentioning this because it's a very important thing to put in mind when we talk about the rest of those issues. And when I go directly to your question, I think I can tell you that since the moment I was born, I started hearing about the army, right? The Israeli army, how I will be part of it, how, people say, we hope that when you are 18, the army will not be there anymore. It will not exist anymore. But if it will, of course, you will join, and you will join as a combat soldier in order to protect your family and your friends and your country. And it's very, very prominent. This concept is very prominent in school, in high school, right? In 12th grade, soldiers come to our school and talk about the military. There is a day where 12th graders go to the north of Israel to see tanks and airplanes and infantry soldiers shooting and just exhibiting the abilities of the military. It's all around us, and the thing that is hidden from us, the thing that is lied about to us, is the occupation as a whole. Yeah, I didn't know what the occupation is even when I was a soldier inside the occupied territories. Yeah. In high school, I really remember this class, and I give this example a lot, of how when we were taught about the 6-day war, yeah,
Yes.
67 war, when we
Yes.
occupied the territories, when we were taught about it, we were never taught about the fact that since the 6-day war until today, we have been ruling the occupied territories with our military. Yeah,
Yes.
and I think this is one of the primary elements which allow the occupation to continue, right? Because we are lying to our own citizens about it. Now, I'm going back to what I started with. The trauma that is so strong in our society is making it very difficult for Israelis to even accept the notion that something is wrong. And this is why our job is very difficult. Yeah, the Israelis who are trying to expose the reality to the public, but also very important, and that's why I believe in it so much, because we cannot allow the fact that we're a traumatized society to legitimize the occupation and the human rights violations that we're responsible for.
Okay, so uh, summing it up, do you think the Israelis don't think of it as occupation?
Look, occupation is not an opinion. Yeah, it's a fact. Yeah, it's a military. It's a legal term regarding to when the military is ruling over
Yes.
occupied territories, right?
Yes.
But it is definitely a problem in the discussion about it in our society that some, the people who support the occupation usually refrain from calling it occupation, right? They use, for example, biblical justifications to say this is not an occupation because it always belonged to the Jewish people.
Okay. I see. I know that you've talked about this many times, but I also wanted you to give your testimony here to my channel about the modus operandi, the way of operation of the Israeli army in the occupied territories. I believe that the soldiers must have the notion that they are there for the security of Israel. And what kind of missions are they given there? Do they face, for example, actual soldiers from the other side? Or do they just act like a kind of police?
Look, I think that we will never be able to go through the entire all of the missions that we are sent to do in the occupied territories. The most important thing, I'll give a few examples, but before that, the most important thing to understand the way through which we work in the occupied territories, the way we occupy the Palestinian people, is by, I think, what I was told 6 years ago when I last served in the occupied territories as a soldier. When my commander told my company, our mission in the area is to make all of the Palestinians around us feel like they cannot lift their head up.
But your role in the army was a tank commander, wasn't it?
Right.
And you served, just to give a little bit of context to the viewers. You served from 2010 to 2016. Am I correct in this?
Not exactly. I served from 2010 to 2013, mandatory service.
Okay.
And then I did a reserves duty. Reserves duty is when you are called back for a few days.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
And my last reserves duty was for 1 month in 2016.
Okay.
And to go back to a question, that mission that I received, right, make all the Palestinians feel like they cannot lift their head up. This is, in one sentence, the way we occupy. Yeah, and in order to fulfill this, we are sent to a vast variety of specific missions, like home invasions, like checkpoints, like digital surveillance missions, like dispersing non-violent protests. Or any protests, like military patrols and so forth.
I would like to enter in some details with some of these missions, because I still have a hard time to understand what is this. The whole thing I've heard about many times was home invasions. How are the homes picked to be invaded? I mean, do they have suspects inside, or how does that work?
Right. So the issue of home invasion specifically for me was one of the shifting elements in my understanding of the occupation and of my political views in general. Because I always thought that when we invade a home, when the Israeli army invades a home, it's because, in that home, there will be someone who is about to kill an Israeli in Tel Aviv, In that home, there will be a bomb that we must catch. That's what I always thought and what most Israelis still think, okay? But when we look at home invasions, we can see that actually some of them are for this reason. Yeah, some of them are definitely to arrest someone dangerous, to find the bomb and so forth. But we are invading homes for many other reasons. I'll give just 2 examples. One example is the mission called mapping. Mappings is when a group of fully armed soldiers invade a family's home in the middle of the night. We check before we invade that that the home is of an innocent family. Yeah. One soldier takes photos of the family members. Another soldier draws on a piece of paper the way the house looks like, and then they leave the home. The intention of this, according to the military, is to collect intelligence, right? We need to know how every home in the West Bank looks like, just in case, generally.
Okay.
But then our testimonies in Breaking the Silence come to reveal reality, yeah. And we have testimonies from this mission about how a soldier came back to his parents, did the laundry, and found all the different pieces of paper where he drew the homes and the way they look like.
So they just they did nothing with this information.
Exactly, they didn't have any with the information. But what does this mission truly serve, right? I go back to the main mission, making the Palestinians feel like they cannot lift their head up, right? I think one of the missions that really changed my mind, was very crucial for me, was the mission called mock arrest. Mock arrest is when a group of fully armed soldiers invade, again, an innocent family's home, arrest one of the family members, only for training of how to do an arrest. Of course, without even telling the family members that it's for training.
So you're using it's almost like a live target. It's for your training.
Yes.
You call it one. Okay. So let me. So mock arrest. You just randomly enter a family home, most likely, and do all the procedures like they were some kind of enemy, even they are not.
Exactly. It's not random. It's more than that. We check before that for sure they are innocent.
Ooh,
right?
Okay.
Because if we end up doing a mock arrest in a house that is dangerous for the soldiers, we don't want it because it's supposed to be only training.
Okay. Right? But when you just, the Palestinian reaction, doesn't this put everyone at risk? Because I imagine that no one likes to get their home invaded, and maybe feel that their children are in danger. Don't you have? Doesn't happen like situations where there are reactions from the families, and then things turn out to be violent?
I have to tell you that one of the interesting things I think from our testimonies is to see that there is very rarely a reaction like you described for the Palestinians, and that is because of the power dynamic, right? We have fully armed soldiers, one of the strongest militaries in the world, against people who are in their home. Like it's not. They don't want. Most people don't want to risk their family. They understand that it's better if they just accept, be quiet, and let it pass. Right?
Okay.
Some do react, but it's very rare.
I would like to hear your thoughts on this, because this kind of action that you just described, even if it doesn't produce immediate violence, like you just said, people just accept it, so they try to keep everyone safe. But in a medium long term, this for sure leaves some marks in this Palestinian people. Isn't it feeding the resistance? Because you are feeding the people with genuine anger sentiments against the Israelis that are doing this. How does this improve Israeli security?
Yeah, look, there is no question that the way we operate in the occupied territories leave long-lasting consequences for the Palestinians. Recently, a year ago, approximately a year and a half ago, we published a report about home invasion specifically. And we did it together with an organization called Physicians for Human Rights and another organization called Yesh Din. And Physicians for Human Rights, they basically sent mental health experts to interview Palestinians about home invasions. And the conclusion was very clear that home invasions leave many children, mainly children, but also adults, with mental health impacts that last their whole lives. Yeah. Okay. And of course, that I will not be surprised if Palestinians, after they live like this, hate us more. Yes. And some of them would want to do something about it.
Yes. When did you realize you participated in this home invasions when you were military?
I,
Uh,
I specifically participated in an invasion to a village, but I didn't enter any home,
okay,
specifically me.
okay, but you had contact with this arrest Palestinians. Did you have any like mission to arrest them in any kind or transport them to some place? What was your interaction? And during this interaction, what were your? I mean, you just mentioned before that there was a moment when you realized about things, but before that moment, what was your what was on your mind, if I may ask?
Yeah, of course. Look, I always wanted to protect my country, right? And I was very motivated to do it. And when I was when I was a soldier, I was also thinking this way. But more and more, I started to understand that something is wrong. It takes time to take this understanding and do something about it, right? Joining Breaking the Silence or something similar, yeah. But I can give you, like, in 2012, there was an operation, a Pillar of Defense,
Yes,
to Gaza. I was stationed next to Gaza. I heard a few soldiers next to me talking about how they are so eager to enter Gaza and kill Arabs. That's what they said. Yeah, that's exactly what they said.
the
That's the
statement.
term.
Yes.
The term they said. And this is, I think, one of the most important moments for me, because that thing that I heard him saying just generated this process in my head, which started doubting the system. Yeah, and it took me 5 more years to join Breaking the Silence, because when you are a soldier, the last thing you want to do is to criticize the system. It puts you in trouble. It makes the relationship with your friends more difficult, and so forth.
Okay.
So it takes time.
And I wanted to ask about that as well. When someone within the Israeli military, which is you were a part of it, and then you realize, and something must change in your behavior. And what kind of trouble can you face if you suddenly think to yourself, I don't want to do this anymore. This is wrong. Do others? Yeah. Do many others? Did that happen to many others like you, colleagues of you, for example?
Look, it's extremely rare for someone to change his mind during the service, right? Or at least say that they change his mind during the service. Most people will just finish the service, which today it's 2.5 years, and afterwards we'll start talking about it, doing something about it, and so forth. It's very, very rare for someone to change that, like to do something while is a soldier. It does happen, but it's very, very rare. The consequence, if you decide to not obey the orders or something like this, will usually be present time for a few days, can be a few months, depends on the situation.
Okay, what about when you are in the service and you already realize this? Do you have the power, for example, if you are sent to a mission to do a mock home invasion, for example, and you already know what this is all about? And does the commander of the group, of the squad, I imagine that should be like a squad size group that does a home invasion, can they like okay, we already did that, and they can lie to their commanders or pretend that they did it but they don't do it because they don't want it? Can this happen?
Yeah, look, you have to, generally it can happen, but it will never happen, because soldiers just don't think this way. Yeah, you're a soldier, the only thing you want is to do what you're told and then go to sleep. That's the only thing you want. Yeah, okay. To do something like this, it puts you in such danger for present, for so many other things. And also soldiers don't think like this. Yeah, okay. Most people don't criticize the system at all. Yeah, it's a minority. We have to realize that.
But you talked in an interview I've seen from you. You talked about at some point that you wanted to improve the invasion, improve the occupation. That was the term. Improve the occupation. Somehow you realized, and when you were part of the system, you wanted to make it better.
Right.
What was this all about? Can you explain a little
Yeah.
bit?
Look, one of the notions that many of the Israelis who join the military uh, join it with is the notion that it's better that I will join the occupation even though I'm against it, because I will make sure that Palestinians are treated well, and in that way I will improve the occupation. Right? I make the situation better.
Okay.
That's also something I was thinking about when I did reserves duty in 2016. A group of Palestinians were arrested by another unit. They brought them to our base. I was in charge of guarding them until we decide what to do with them. So 4 Palestinians, handcuffed, blindfolded, enter our base. We put them in 4 chairs in front of the fence of our base. And I was standing there thinking to myself, what can I do now to improve the situation for these 4 Palestinians?
In front of the fence, not in a
Yeah,
cell, not in a.
yeah, not in a cell. It's not
Mhm.
a detention center. It's not a prison or anything.
In
It's not a place where Palestinians are supposed to be kept. Yeah, like around them, soldiers are in their pajamas. It's a military
Okay.
base. Yeah,
Mhm.
reserves duty base. So anyway, I'm standing there, and I'm next to these 4 Palestinians, and I'm thinking to myself, what can I do now to improve the situation? And I asked them if they want to eat something, and I asked them if they want to listen to music, and they said no. And this was also a shifting moment for me, because I started thinking after they said no. First of all, these are my only 2 ideas, like that's it. That's the only difference I can make. And second, what is the difference between me and another soldier in my unit that is, that I always looked like at him like he is really, really bad, right? But
Okay.
what is the difference between us if we're both sent to do the same mission? And this is exactly what we're talking about in Breaking the Silence. The problem in the occupation is not the soldiers who do it, usually. It's the mission that we're sent to do.
Okay. It's the system itself. I imagine that the people that are blindfolded and handcuffed, they have some thoughts on their minds, but not listen to music or eat something like in a normal
Exactly.
situation.
But
Yes.
it can also reveal you how a soldier thinks like. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
No?
Okay. How about this? I mean, even when the first question I asked you was about your upbringing and the perception you had on the whole notion of occupation, but when you do these missions throughout your service, and you encounter a lot of children at homes, uh, doesn't this help to gain some conscience? Because after all, they're just children. You can do it once, but after you've done it, like I imagine in a year, or so, you can do like 10 times or more. Shouldn't this? Doesn't it surprise you that the whole, or at least the most of the Israeli soldiers would realize this right away, that what they are doing is it's not.
Look, I think first of all, the issue of home invasions and children is definitely something that comes up in many of the testimonies we receive in Breaking the Silence. Okay, 100%. With that, you have to realize and understand how strong are the powers who support and do a lot in order to maintain the occupation itself, right? Everything is justified when you say security, right?
Okay.
So the justification forces in our minds and in everything around us, the media, the political sphere, and so forth, everything is so strong that most people just don't think the way you think. I understand why you ask it, because when you look at it from the outside,
Yes.
it seems crazy, right? I agree with you.
Yeah.
But the forces that operate on our heads as soldiers are so strong and not allow us to think this way.
Uh, many of the Western media portrays the Palestinians oftentimes like a group that brews terrorism, but isn't it the other way around? This honest question.
Yeah.
What
Look,
isn't it state terrorism? What the Israeli system does?
Look, I think that it's very important to recognize that uh, some Palestinian factions, some Palestinian groups definitely operate
Okay.
in terroristic ways, and of course, we do not accept any of these ways. Shooting rockets indiscriminately into Israel, or exploding in people in Tel Aviv, or shooting in Tel Aviv randomly. All these kind of violent acts are terrible from the Palestinian side, and the Palestinians we cooperate with completely don't work like this. Of course, we cooperate with Palestinians who do non-violent resistance and things this way.
Like youth
Like,
against settlements, for
yeah,
example.
like Mohamed, I saw your interview with him.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
For your question, we can definitely see elements of instilling fear in the Palestinian population, which we are using our military to do. Unfortunately, I'm saying it. I'm not happy about it. I think it's terrible. But unfortunately, today we're using our military to occupy, to intimidate, to scare the Palestinian population, and it's something we are trying to. That is exactly one of the things we're trying to explain to our society.
Has your role as a tank commander in the army? Have you ever seen actual combat against other armed forces?
No, so it's important to understand that at the tank commander thing is only my training. Yeah.
Okay.
But usually every soldier in the army has a training for some role, right?
Yeah,
Tank
yes.
commander, artillery,
speciality.
Specialty. But we usually don't use it because we usually just learn it and then go to occupy the Palestinians. Yeah?
Okay.
And it's another central element of the occupation, yeah, because the soldiers who invade homes and do checkpoints, so forth, they're not trained to do this, yeah. They're trained to be tank commanders or artillery fighters or infantry, like invading villages in Syria. Yeah, this is our training.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
So I'm happy that I've never used my tank against anyone.
Okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter really much because most of our day-to-day work as the army is the occupied territories. That is not a situation of a combat between two militaries. It's a situation where the military is used as a police force.
Okay, you talked about the checkpoints as well, and I've seen you testifying about this in an interview, and I always thought that checkpoints were put in places to create like buffer zones between Palestinians' territory and actually Israeli territory. But it's not like this. You talked about random checkpoints. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Look, like you, I always thought that the checkpoints are what distinguishes difference on the border between Israel and the Palestinians, right? But I'll give you an example from a mission I was sent to do. One evening, again in 2016, my commander tells me, today we're going to open a checkpoint between two Palestinian villages. Yeah. So this is called a flying checkpoint. Yeah, a random checkpoint.
And what was the purpose of this checkpoint between?
And the purpose, as he told me specifically in my mission, was to make Palestinian drug dealers know that we are also there, right? And I find myself at 2 a.m. when it's completely dark in a checkpoint, not on the way to Israel, not on the way even to a settlement, yeah, between two Palestinian villages, risking my life, that the official mission is to let Palestinian drug dealers know that we are there, not even to search for them, yeah. Even when cars came, we were not searching for drugs. It wasn't the mission.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and these flying checkpoints are the vast majority of checkpoints. Yeah. There are dozens of checkpoints like this as we speak right now, all over the West Bank. Yeah. And they are placed sometimes also in the entrance to Palestinian villages. Yeah. Okay. Because the intention goes back to what I was, again, to this very simple mission. We need to make the Palestinians know who's the boss, know who controls them. We need to make Palestinian lives unplannable, right? A Palestinian who goes out of his home doesn't know if it will take him 1 hour to go to work or 5 hours.
Okay. One other thing that it comes to my mind is the political uh, the political situation in Israel. You have the Knesset, the parliament, and you have different forces there. And when I do my readings through the site of Breaking the Silence, I often read that you have these adverse positions from right wing. Is this the Palestinian issue treated like this? Like the left wing defends the human rights of Palestinians, and the right wing supports the occupation. Can it be clearly seen like this in the political
Yeah,
aspect of things?
I think, generally, when we talk about Israeli politics, it's the left and right issue is very different than the rest of the world, right? Because, for example, in Portugal, right, left meaning more socialist
Yes.
economical policies,
Yes.
and right is more capitalist.
Yes.
In Israel, it's not always the situation, and left and right is only about the Palestinian issue. Yeah,
Okay.
generally.
Okay.
Now, there are parties, yeah, mainly Meretz and the Joint List, the Joint Arab List, who definitely talk about Palestinian human rights. But unfortunately, those are the only parties who talk this way, yeah, and also not enough in my opinion.
Mhm.
And the main elements in Israeli society who speak about Palestinian human rights today are actually civil society and not political parties. And it's only a sign of how indifferent, how easy it is today in Israel to completely ignore the situation, which is the most important situation that's happening here, right? It's very easy for us Israelis that are much less affected, relatively almost not affected
Mhm.
by the occupation comparing to what the Palestinians go through,
Mhm.
just forget about it, not do anything about it, and we can see it in this current election process and all other elections before it in the last 5-10 years, that the occupation is not even part of the discussion. Because
Okay.
today political parties understand that talking about the occupation harms them politically. Yeah, most of them, not all of them, but most of them understand that, and they just prefer to ignore it, even though we are all going to be affected by this, and it's going to explode in our faces eventually.
So they act like it's the elephant in the room that no one wants to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
they don't
uh,
want to mention it exactly.
okay. And what about, for example, the settlements? Is there actually a need to install the settlements, or this is also part of the policy that Israel wants to show who is the boss? Or
Well,
are there many Israelis without home that need to go to these lands escorted by the army?
look, the settlement started as a very fringe idea in 67, 68, 69 by some like people who were looked at as like radical and crazy. Yeah, but with the years, it became extremely part of a main part of the consensus.
Mhm.
Now, the settlement project is an ideological project, yeah, which aims to settle Israelis in the occupied territories in the West Bank, in Gaza also. Yeah, they still talk about Gaza, even though we dismantled the settlements there. And it's an ideological project. The fact is that Israel today is promoting this project, yeah, for many different reasons. Some of them are ideological, some of them are political, right? Because they don't want to get in a political struggle with the settlers, because the settlers have a lot of political power, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, but the main element of this project is an ideological project, which looks at Palestinians as people who have less, who deserve less, who deserve less than
Okay.
us.
Okay.
And
That
that's why land theft is a big part of it, settler violence is a big part of it, and so forth.
Okay, so I understand. Has because sometimes I see, for example, in Hebron, that the settlement installed on the center of the city, and for me, that didn't make any. Even if some of this makes sense, it didn't make any sense. Like for a settlement to be installed in the center of already populated city, and not in some empty area, for example. And I found this nevertheless puzzling. But what about, for example, I've read a piece of news that was linked in the website of breaking the silence. That it says like this: in June, Major General Tamir Yadai, the commander of the IDF Central Command, announced that the nefarious mapping that you referred about previously, practice, that you also been accused of lying about, was now being cancelled. And this goes on and talks about use of technology to control the Palestinians. Does this mean that, for example, home invasions and this kind of the mapping that you just described before, it will stop because they are putting cameras and facial recognition everywhere? What is this all about?
Look, I think there are two elements to your question. One is the fact that they said mappings ended, right?
Yes.
Which is amazing, right? Because for years we have been talking about this, and they never acknowledged it, and suddenly they just don't do. They say that it ended. So
Yes,
what is
yes,
ending?
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, regardless of that, it didn't end. Like after the statement,
Mm-hmm.
we still heard about mappings, and we still hear today about mappings. Yeah. So that's first of all. They say a lot of things that they think sound good, but in practice they didn't really end mapping.
Okay.
At least we saw some examples of mapping since this announcement. Okay. Maybe less, maybe they're happening less or so forth, but they're still happening.
Okay.
Another element is the digital surveillance that you mentioned, and definitely one of the recent developments of the way we occupy the Palestinians is that we started also digitally occupying them, biometrically occupying them.
Okay.
There is a mission called the Blue Wolf, when soldiers are sent to take photos of Palestinian faces in Palestinian villages and cities and agricultural lands. The system detects the face using facial recognition software, and also creates a biometric database of the Palestinian population. Yeah, this is only one example of the way we digitally occupy them. This issue of the Blue Wolf, I think the main way to understand it is the fact that part of this mission is also the competition element. Yeah, there is a competition between the different units in the West Bank of which unit takes most photos of Palestinians during every week. And every week, by the end of every week, the unit that took most photos, they receive a prize, like going back home early or getting a nice dinner or other things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, which shows us how deep this project is and how eroded our thinking is. Right, we're sending soldiers in kind of like a video game that is on the Palestinians, on the Palestinian people.
Yeah. I understand. This is it's an absolute invasion and violation of many of the rights. This in the actual geopolitical context, we now have a major event developing, as you know, which is the war in Ukraine, and this also leads me to some questions, and I wanted to hear your thoughts about it. Why is everyone so outraged with what's going on in Ukraine, and Palestine doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm happy that people are outraged with Ukraine. I think not enough. I think all of us, the entire world, should do more about this issue, 100%. And it's terrible what we see happening there and the unfoldings there. I also agree with you that we can learn from it about the indifference towards the Palestinians. Yeah, I'm not saying it's the same situation. Of course, it's a completely different way of attack. The way Russia attacks Ukraine is completely different than what we do. So forth. Of course, I'm not comparing the situations, but I am comparing the attention. Yeah, and for over 55 years, the Palestinians have been living under our occupation, and Israel still is successful in legitimizing this.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that there are so many reasons for this. Yeah, some of them can be also related to racism, right? Who is attacked in Ukraine? What type of people? How they look like?
Okay.
What's their religion? Yeah.
Yes.
Who is attacked in Palestine? What their color is? What their
yeah. Okay.
yeah?
Yes.
All that, but I think it is also, it's also a major geopolitical issue, right? It's very easy to be against Russia, right?
Yes.
Russia is the historical enemy of
Yeah,
the West.
historical enemy. Yes,
Yeah,
since before the Soviet Revolution, still.
exactly.
Yes. Mhm.
Israel is part of the West. Yeah, it's
Yes.
considered part of the Western democracy
Yes.
family of democracies.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, there are heavy attacks against Israel. There were wars fought here
Yes.
that
Yes.
Israel had to defend itself and should have defended itself. And Israelis casualties in their thousands. It's not that simple. But I do think that we can learn from the situation in Ukraine, that when the world decide to do something, they can do something. And we definitely believe in breaking the silence as part of the solution to the occupation. Is that the world will do more, because now the world is not doing anything. It's actually doing the opposite. It's supporting the
Okay.
occupation.
I believe that because you are a face, a recognizable face from the organization Breaking the Silence, that you suffer. We mentioned the right-wing accusations to you, the organization. But as a person, have you do you suffer any kind of pressures, direct pressures from either from individuals or from institutions because of what you do and exposing this
Look,
situation?
all of us in Breaking the Silence, when we agree to join, we know that what we are putting ourselves into, right? It is a social, you can say, problem in Israel to be part of Breaking the Silence, and some people have trouble with their families or their friends and so forth. The incitement against organizations like us is pretty big, right? From the government, from other organizations and things like this. I think we're still today in a kind of okay situation, depending on our specifically me. I'm in a good place, right? Like, my family is supportive, my friends are supportive, I live in a supportive area. Yeah. So
Okay.
specifically talking about me, I'm okay. Yeah. It's always important to just look at it also relatively to the situation we're talking about. But we also learn that it's important to be true to ourselves, and remember that, yeah, we are putting ourselves in a difficult situation inside our country. But eventually, anyone who joined Breaking the Silence, or I can say for me personally, I was in a stage where it was more difficult for me not to join than to join. Yeah, because I was feeling
Okay.
so strongly about the situation,
Okay.
and I wanted to do something.
Yes.
And to not do something is more difficult than to actually start doing something, and it feels very, very right. And it
Okay.
feels very, very good to do something you believe in.
Yes. And about these people that might be not in such an easy, not I don't want to say easy, but as you described it, a more comfortable situation comparable to yours. What kind of pressures can they feel from society? I mean, do they get questioned by authorities? Do they have difficulty in finding a job, or does this happen, or they are just looked upon as different?
It really depends on the time, on what is happening, on the different things we do as Breaking the Silence, and the amount of attention toward us. It's mainly, the main thing is incitement, public incitement, and that you don't feel safe everywhere, right?
Okay.
You don't feel safe to talk about, like, you ride in a taxi, for example. You don't feel safe saying, I'm from Breaking the Silence. You don't know what will be the reaction. Yeah?
Okay.
You meet someone new. You don't
Okay.
want, you need to be very cautious. We had an incident when one of our volunteers was with us for 1 year, and then discovered that he was recording everything, and he was passing the information to a right-wing organization. Yeah?
Okay.
So it's also an issue of trust. Yeah, it's very difficult to trust people. These kind of issues are very prominent in our personal lives.
Okay, so you had how they say, a spy inside your organization.
Yes.
So this
Yes.
this can happen. What you've said so many things, and some of the things actually it's I believe that many people are not aware of all these details. But as for wrapping our conversation up, wo- is there any testimony, any statement that you would like to make broadly,
Yeah,
or something that maybe I've failed to ask because I'm a shift worker and at this time it's 10 o'clock. It was 10 o'clock in the morning and I should be sleeping. I had to make a shift in my biological schedule.
I think that maybe the most important thing to understand about this whole issue is that we all have responsibility. We as Israelis have responsibility,
Mhm.
but you as Portuguese citizen or anyone else also has responsibility. We live in a globalized world. You know, Portugal, if we give an example,
Yes,
has vast ties with Israel. And if you
yes,
have vast ties with Israel, you also have responsibility for the occupation. It's very easy to say that this is not our problem. Yeah, it's Israel's issue. They should
okay,
take care of it. But it's not the situation. Yeah, the weapon I used was manufactured in the US. The EU has billions of euros agreements with Israel about many different issues. And when you do that, and I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying if you do it,
mm-hmm.
you have to understand you have responsibility. You have to, and today the people who want to call themselves Israel's friends are doing the easy thing, yeah, not annoying Israel. But this is not being a really good friend. If you care, even if you care about Israel, yeah, you need to
Okay,
understand that caring about Israel is ending the occupation. Exactly, and it's also important to care about even more, not more, but very important to talk about Palestinian human rights and
okay,
people's human rights in general and so forth. But even if you want to look at it from the perspective of being a friend to Israel,
mm-hmm.
also that is a reason to help us end the occupation. And there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are against the occupation. And we need to increase this number. And one of the ways to increase it is that more and more people will care about it, including the international community.
Yes. So, and one last thing is, uh, so you think, and you genuinely think, and people in the organization Breaking the Silence, that it's actually possible to make it that both Palestinians and Israelis can live in peace.
Yeah, of course. We
This
cooperate. We
despite
cooperate
the
with.
territorial
Yeah,
claims that.
of course it is. Look, first of all, in history, we have like so many cases, like similar cases of hate. You know, French and England were in wars for
Yeah,
hundreds of
yes,
years, and now they are best friends, right?
yes,
South Africa, not perfect, but
yes,
better. Yeah.
yes, better, yes.
Uh, so many other examples. We definitely think the problem, or not the problem, it's very possible to live together. We cooperate with hundreds of Palestinians, activists, and so forth. We promote this as well. We believe that one of the keys, is to fight occupation together with Palestinians, and this is one of the projects that we're working on today.
Okay, Ori, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was really an enlightening conversation. I will, of course, put this out there as much as I can in all in all social networks and promote it as much as I can. And please keep doing what you're doing for the sake of peace and human rights. And for my part, again, thank you very much.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, you too. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye bye.